Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Studio. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and here we are with another perfect launch. Good to see everybody. Always need to get a sound check on this because I have to move it back and forth, and I want to make sure that we're not blowing anything away. So, how's that looking? How's that sounding? Everything good? Yeah? Five? Yeah? Okay. So what? Hope everybody's doing well. It's good to be here. Bunch of things to talk about. It's good for now, says Dave Big Booty. Filtrek 5x5. He's an audio engineer. He ought to know. Anyway, here we are. So good to see everyone. It is the 20th of February. A couple things to chat about here before we take some questions. Um, First of all, as many of you know, we roll a pre-roll show for our Twitch viewers. We don't record it because it would completely not only kill the live stream, it would also, um, get us all kinds of copyright issues and stuff. But since we don't record it, stream it out on Twitch, we get to see it a lot. And the last thing we roll before we do the Stratosphere Studio show is the opening theme from Star Trek. And I was looking at that opening credits from Star Trek, and I thought, um, I, it's hard to put my finger on it for the longest time. I think Doomcock pointed it out eventually. But one of the reasons that show is just so magic uh, is because is in my opinion is because of the star field, and that was always like my favorite part of Star Trek was just watching the stars go by, and yet faster they go, faster you're going. Thought it was fantastic, loved it. Um, and then I realized that really, pretty much since then, everything is in a wormhole now. I'm not aware of any other science fiction show since Star Trek that showed the stars as you move past it. It's either you know, well, Star Wars has the wormhole. You have the whoosh thing through the wormhole, and then they put the Enterprise in a wormhole when Jar Jar Abrams did the reboot, and I oh wow, wormhole. It's not the same. It's just not the same. I just love it. One of the things you can do with Space Engine, by the way, which we've talked about many times on this show, is that in Space Engine you can just point it and start going faster and faster and faster. And the amount of speed you have to travel to see any motion on the stars is crazy. It's like I can't even remember. I want to say it's 200-300 times the speed of light before you get even any kind of a shift. So I don't know. I just thought I'd mention that. I just always liked that so much. Always liked that Starfield, and Enterprise is cruising along. It's got the little space sonar going in, but it's not sonar really. It's radar sensors. We know. It was fantastic. Um, Worth noting that Gene Roddenberry said Lucas stole the warp drive effect. Yeah, maybe with that push or something. And by the way, we said here we go from Nick, 3 a.m. here in Croatia. And I'm waiting for my favorite conservative to start streaming. Well, thank you for tuning in until he shows up anyway, Nick. Love you, Bill. Sending you greetings from overseas. Never fails to blow my mind, but thank you anyway. So there's that. Um, and then just last night to wash the taste out of this red terror stuff out of my mouth, which I will give you a small flavor of in a minute. Um, I was watching. I just happened to stumble on. Uh, I actually was looking for an episode just to see an episode on TV of The Odd Couple, which if you're a certain age, you know that da 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 da. You either know it or you don't. And I hadn't seen The Odd Couple almost since The Odd Couple was on. I hadn't seen an episode of The Odd Couple in 30 years maybe. That's one of the best things about YouTube. And so I took a look at like a best of, and not only had I forgotten how funny it was, but I'll tell you what really shocked me. Um, And that is how thin everybody was. I remember Jack Klugman, being Oscar Madison, and I thought he must have been a relatively, he looks like a gymnast. Felix Unger, looks like a gymnast. Tony Randall. It's unbelievable how fit everybody was in the 70s. It's really shocking. You really need to do it. And then because of that, one link led to another, and I took a look at the best of Taxi, which is another show I loved. And again, it is really genuinely shocking to see how trim everybody is. Tony Danza and Jeff Conway are like you guys look like you said, look like gymnasts. Mary Lou Henner is just really trim. Judd Hirsch, who I always remembered being a little not paunchy, he was just always the older guy. He is like flat stomach. Even Danny DeVito doesn't look fat, and God, what a brilliant. Just what a brilliant piece of work that was. Airtech, he says, is before the fast food wave at Reverend Jim too, and I don't know if it was the fast food wave. Barbara Durant says it's a high fructose corn syrup. I really think that's what it is, because I remember there was certainly fast food in the 70s. I used to go to McDonald's a couple times a month. And of course, we get less exercise now. There's no question about that. But these are older actors. These are not. Tony Danza was real fit, but you just look at them, and even compared to like the '90s with Friends, they look really just skinny. They look so fit. I couldn't believe how fit everybody looked. It really. It's just one shot after another. You say, oh my God. So something's happening, something's happening to the food. I've heard, of course, that high fructose corn syrup's put in everything because it enhances the flavor of everything. I've heard it's in steak, chicken, Ay caramba. But something is gone really wrong. And it is. I've heard a couple of people talk about this. I mentioned it once, I don't know, 7-8 months ago or something. But you look at the people in the 60s and 70s, and they did nothing but eat hot dogs and candy bars and all of that stuff, and they don't. What I'm trying to say is, we've taken 30 years to get as fat as we are as a society, and that's a boiling the frog slowly kind of thing. But honestly, when you get in the time machine and look back to, 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, it's just astonishing. And clearly, it's not a question of, one or two people or let it slack. I don't even think it's a question of people eating a lot more. I think it's mostly just the calorie load in this food is incredible. And I remember talking about when I got over COVID, I hadn't eaten anything in probably 11, 12 days. And then when I I think the first thing I tried to drink was cranberry juice, and it was just like, just sugar and everything. But it's crept back in, so now I'm back on my sugar metabolism. So anyway, Dave Big Booty says the hippies at Woodstock are all ripped like marathon runners. There's a lot of things that really needs to be looked at and adjusted. Ed Smith wants to know, did you watch WKRP in Cincinnati? Yeah, I watched all of them. And I had just I probably watched 25, 30 minutes of The Odd Couple, some of their best scenes. Those are highlights, but and about, I don't know, half an hour and 45 minutes on Taxi. And those shows are really, really, really well written. They're really, really well written. They're very clever, and they're very moving. Before they did a very special episode kind of thing that made everything sort of, maudlin and kind of, overly sentimental. Um, the pilot for Taxi has Alex Rieger, Judd Hirsch's character, driving down to Miami to see his daughter, who he hasn't seen in 15 years. She's moving from South America to Portugal. He goes to Miami International Airport, which looks like it was shot was like from 1962. And they're in Miami International Airport, and he's got about 7 or 8 minutes with her at the gate, and it's like, this is genuinely moving. I mean, this is it wasn't mawkish. It was just good. Bart Stretcher said the 70s TV present a skewed sample. Maybe skinny was the style. It was, well, whether it was the style or not, it was not a skewed sample. TV will represent TV, well, at least network TV, which is pretty much gone now, but that has to kind of represent its audience because that's, you're trying to track. If you were to run a show today with people that, then you would not only lose a lot of audience, you would have the lunatics descending in force. So it was just, people were much thinner then, and not just thinner kids. They just stayed thinner, and I am trying to knock 7-8 pounds off, and it's practically impossible. So anyway, it was just striking. Anyway, so a couple things, and I'll try and get as many questions done as possible. And again, I kind of need to keep it relatively brief tonight, but I'll tell you what happened since we spoke last. I have been working on, as you know, this series for Daily Wire, and it has been a bear. And the episode 6 that I had finished and turned in somewhere around Wednesday or Thursday of last week. Bill, show us your shirt. Okay, fine, there you go. See, it's all got like, it's got like America on it. So I'd finished episode 6 and turned it in, and I'd finished the Red Terror. Episode 6 was the Red Terror, and I basically ended with something like, so Lenin, turned his, unleashed Dzerzhinsky and his Cheka, and he, they went out into the country, with minds, scarlet with revenge and blood in their mouths, something like that, right? And I thought, well, that's kind of a cool message. And then I just kept thinking, this whole thing is talking about all of this murder, and it's so abstract. And I had been looking for months, been looking for a like a first person account in details, and I just couldn't find anything. And it's why I spent so much time researching this thing. And I just, after it was done, I was working on this thing. I just came in to start working on the next episode on Friday afternoon, and I just wouldn't give up on it. I needed something tangible. I needed something that that was sourced and that was tangible. So I just kept digging. And then somewhere on either, I want to say it was early Friday evening, I found something. There goes the stream. I don't know. I'm getting people saying, well, look, I really can't control this anymore. I just can't. I can't keep stopping it, and I don't know what to say. If somebody wants to tell them to keep refreshing, is Twitch working? Anyway, people are telling me to lose pounds, I have to cut carbs, I have to exercise, do all that other stuff. Yeah, but if I could also remove all the high fructose corn syrup, I feel like that'd be a little easier. This is so bloody annoying. So I don't know. Some people are saying the stream was cut. Some people are saying it's not. I guess I can't worry about that. I just have to keep going. This is what I found. It's just driving me out of my mind. I'm just really at the end of my rope here with this whole frickin' thing. I'm looking at YouTube and people are just saying crash, power outage, it's gone, it's gone, it's gone. I don't know. If we have any mods or anything in the YouTube thing, if they could just say refresh and so on, I'm just gonna have to push on because otherwise I'll have a 9-part episode like the one that I did and still haven't put that together yet. Anyway, so here's what happened. So I found, after 4 months of looking for it, I found a first person a small book on somebody who had lived through the Red Terror. And let's not forget that the Red Terror was relatively minor compared to the Great Terror. Can can I get a mod in the YouTube stream to just say yes, we're still floating and we're gonna just refresh the thing or whatever? I don't know what to do. It's just enough to drive a man out of their minds. I'll do it myself then. Fine. Okay, forget it. Get the Twitch link in there because that apparently is working, at least for the moment or two. This is so fucking frustrating. It's unbearable. I want. Okay. All right. I'm just gonna go ahead. Okay. All right. So, it only took me 9 days to tell this story, and so here we go. This is unbelievably frustrating. Seriously, it's unbelievably stressful. Just enough. So I found in the U.S. archives, I found an article that was written in 2014 by a French woman who had found a book called Red Terror by a Russian author named I think I know it by now. I spent enough time working on it. S.P. Melganov. So S.P. Melganov wrote a book called The Red Terror. It was published in Berlin in 1924, so it was a contemporary thing. It was published in Berlin, in German, and then there was a 1975 Hyperion release of it in English. No reprints. It's been out of print since 1975. S.P. Melganov. Gunov. It's called Red Terror. It's honestly, this YouTube stream dropping out is enough to make me just lose my freaking mind. I don't have any elastic left after all of this stuff. I really don't. I just don't know what to do about it. I'm just gonna cover it up, and it's just so bloody frustrating. It's enough to drive you out of your mind. Anyway, so this woman found this book by this guy. She was doing an article in 2014. She was so struck by it. She was a translator, translated the whole thing. And I finally found it, and it was 98,000 words. I found it on Friday afternoon. So Friday afternoon, Friday night, I've been here to 2 or 3 in the morning for the last 4 or 5 days. And I read it. It's 98,000 words long. And then I pulled 16,000 words of the 98,000 that I thought were the most shocking. And then I had to cut that down to about 4,000 words. And and uh, and I had to rewrite the entire second half of episode 6 because it's the most important stuff in the series. I've been working on this for 6 months now. I found it Friday night, so I've been here every night for the last 3 nights till 3 or 4 in the morning, trying to format the stuff to get it to fit inside episode 6. Now I got to get 7 and 8 out in a week, which I think I can do. But I did want to share a little bit of this because it just beggars description. So I might read you 3 or 4 passages of this. So these are first-person accounts of what the Soviets did to their own people between 1918 and 1922. When there was an assassination attempt on Lenin's life on August 30th, 1918, and they did kill the guy who was the head of the Cheka in St. Petersburg. So they went out there using this excuse to kill everybody. And here are, after an enormous amount of work, I'll just read you a couple of blocks from this. This is, again, from Red Terror, and this is by a contemporary who either lived through it or collated stuff from the people that he talked to who lived through it. So here are a number of different little stories. Here's the first one. As soon as the snow melts, the friends and families of the dead sneak to the creek, single and in groups, looking over their shoulders in fear. At first, the visitors were being arrested, but there were so many of them, and they kept coming despite the arrests. The floodwaters exposed the victims of communist persecution by washing away dirt. How many? Unlikely one could tell. Even the Cheka itself doesn't know. Approximately 1,500 have been executed with and without documentation in 1918 and 19. The most recent corpses, executed late last autumn, have not yet decomposed. Wearing nothing but underwear, with the hands tied behind their backs, sometimes in sacks or completely naked, it's frightening to look at the bottom of this scary creek, but the visitors look, peering into any marks that would allow them to identify the body of a relative. And with every day that comes, the creek becomes scarier and scarier for the Saratov residents. It consumes more and more victims. The steep slope slides after every execution, burying the dead. The creek widens, but every spring, floodwater unearths the latest execution victims. Edward Smith's got the link in the Twitch thing. I don't want to give it all away, obviously. A staff captain, assistant supervisor of the under officer school died a horrible death. While gravely wounded, he was grabbed by the hands and feet by the Red Army nurses, and his head was smashed into the stone wall. The Reds threw 50 hog-tied officers into the iron kiln. The remains of those victims were later found in the slag refuge from the factory. The dead were left at the place of execution, and the families were not allowed to inter the bodies, and the dogs and pigs dragged them across the steppes. The peasants of Urin village in Kostroma region had to put on 5 or more shirts in order to decrease the pain from flogging, but that didn't help as the whips had been made out of barbed wires. Often the shirts became stuck in the scars and dried up so that they had to be softened with warm water. This is one of my 2 or 3 favorites. There's a revered icon of the Virgin Mary in the village of Vainskaya. The Spanish flu epidemic was ravaging the residents. They organized a prayer and procession for the cross, for which local Cheka arrested both priests and the icon. The peasants learned of the desecration of the icon by the Cheka and went like a wall to rescue the god's mother, meaning the icon. The women, elderly, and children were there. The Cheka fired on them with machine guns. The machine gun is downing the ranks, but They're coming without seeing anything, over the corpses, over the wounded, crawling ahead, mothers holding the babies, with everyone screaming, "Mother, the Savior, save and pardon us. We are going to die for you," meaning to die for the icon. One common practice was that of making what they called bourgeois gloves. The victim has both hands placed into a pot of boiling water for several minutes. When they're removed, the skin is peeled off with hooks, and it leaves little gloves made out of human skin. I couldn't believe this was real, but this guy's got documentation. He's got a lot of pictures, and he has the names of the people in the pictures. Oh, great. It looks like we're getting... anyway. Here are the tortures of the so-called Chinese Cheka in Kiev. The tortured was tied to a wall or a pole. Then they firmly attached one end of a pipe a few inches in diameter to his body. A rat was sent down the other end of the pipe, which was immediately covered with a wire mesh and heated with fire. The animal, desperately trying to escape heat, started gnawing through the body of the victim to find escape. That torture lasted for hours and sometimes into the day after, until the victim died. I don't want to show it all, but at the same time, I kind of need to get this out of my system. The Cheka under Savenko did the following. The tortured have been put naked into a barrel into which very long nails have been driven and then rolled back and forth in Vorenge. They burned the most rebelling peasants at the charred poles here and watched sitting on a chair. The officers have been tortured in Odessa by being chained to boards and slowly inserting them into furnaces. Others have been torn apart by winches. Others have been dipped in boiling water and then burned in a furnace. The victims have been put into a crate with rotting corpses in Kiev and were threatened with being buried in the crate alive. The crate was then buried, then dug out a half an hour later, and the interrogation continued. And that continued several times in a row. Is it surprising that people have gone mad? This one is beyond belief. In Alexievskaya village north in the Vorenge region, victims were exposed to a heated bath and then sent out into the cold. The naked victims have been drenched with cold water in the winter cold, turning them into ice statues. Freezing into an ice statue was widely practiced in Orel region during the food confiscations. Two to go. Here's a striking description of political exile by G.M. Yudovich, transferred from Moscow to Utyrossovsk of the North Diensk region in the fall of 1921. Quote, "The day brought new horror, food. We were fed with half-rotten fish only. There were no grains. The jailers stole it. Kitchenwares are never washed. Everything is cooked in dirty pots. The pots used to cook disgusting broth are teeming with an incredible number of worms. There are 9 bunk beds made of boards. No mattresses, pillows, nothing. The women in tattered clothes, some almost naked or half dead, lying on the beds and the floor. The floor is concrete and never cleaned. Underwear is worn for up to 2 months without being changed or washed. I cannot recall another night so horrible as the one spent in Vitaya prison. Billions of insects. The inmates are throwing themselves around, moaning, begging for water. We were given soup at 8 p.m. I never saw anything like that before. It was cooked from the dirty horse heads, the pieces of horse hides, hair, some slime. Bugs are floating in dark, stinky liquid. People eat that horrible broth eagerly, taking turns at swallowing, fighting for potato peel. A few minutes later, many of them vomit. So ends a day and comes another nightmarish night." And this is the one that I saved for last. This is way before Stalin. This is all Lenin's work. This one's not so much the most graphic as to me, it's just the most horrible. In May of 1920, a group of homeless children aged 11 to 15 were arrested in Moscow on suspicion of being pickpockets. They were locked in a basement cell separate from the rest, but together as a group. The Cheka demanded from the children, at first by threats and promise of reward, to inform on other pickpockets. The children said they didn't know anyone. After the fruitless interrogation, several jailers entered their cell and started a savage beating. At first they beat with fists, and then when the children fell to the floor, they started kicking them with boots. The children promised to turn everybody in. They had to be driven around the city all day and taken to the railway terminals. At first, they tried not to recognize and point out anyone. Then even more severe beatings were applied that night. Now, to avoid beating, they started framing the innocent and the unfamiliar. Emaciated, bruised, disheveled, with permanently scarred faces, they looked like hunted down animals prepared for certain and near death. They twitched, they often cried and shouted while asleep. The long-term inmates told me that for the entire length of their arrest, for their entire lives in prison, even during penal solitude under the monarchy, they never heard such desperate screaming as of those children who realized that they were being taken back to that basement. And they never experienced such burning hatred as that for the violence committed against the children thieves. The prison was crying when scared and weeping children were led down the corridors and then across the prison yard. So that's what they do, and I've got a lot of background stuff. I got LED walls and stuff, and I've got the photographs that are in there. The photographs, thank God, are so badly reproduced and so old they're blurry enough for me to actually use because everybody there has been tortured. And then I thought, how am I going to end this thing? I don't know. I realized I'll just read you the ending because it's reason I bring this up is because I wasn't able to post any episodes for last several days because I've been chewing on this. I'm catching up tonight after this is done. So this is what I wrote after the last of these accounts. While I'm reading the quotes, because it's 4 or 5 minutes of quotes, I've got the stage lights for the first time ever go to complete blood red while I'm talking, then they come back up to white again. And this is how I closed it. Shortly after the Reds captured the Georgian capital of Tbilisi, the local Cheka published an anthology called The Cheka's Smile. A roving executioner named Alexander Yudik contributed the following poem. There is no greater joy, no better music than the crunch of broken lives and bones. This is why, when our eyes are languid and passion begins to seethe stormily in the breast, I want to write upon your sentence one unquavering thing. Up against a wall, shoot! Not including the ensuing starvation, which would push the number to several million. The lowest possible number of those tortured and executed between August of 1918 and February of 1922 is 100,000 people. Now, many of them were as horrific as those described by S.P. Melnikov, the guy who should have a statue outside of the Lubyanka where Felix Dzerzhinsky's was and will possibly return to if the current Red Tsar has his way. But most of it was far less dramatic. It was more routine, more banal. Max Volozhin, a Russian poet who survived the horrors and atrocities of the Red Terror while in Crimea, captured the essence of Lenin and his communists almost laconically. In a poem titled simply Terror, he wrote, "They gathered to work at night. They read denunciations, certificates, cases. They hurriedly signed sentences. They yawned. They drank wine. At night, they chased barefooted, naked people over ice-covered stones against a northeast wind into wastelands outside town. They threw them, not all killed yet, into a pit. They hurriedly covered them with earth, and then, with an expansive Russian song, they returned home to the town." And then I thought, all right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the whole stage to black. I'm just going to go, lights are going to just go black. And then on these video screens behind me, I'm going to put up 3 or 4 pictures of American college students waving the hammer and sickle flag or wearing the hammer and sickle shirt. And I'm not going to say a frickin' word. I'm just going to go out on that. That's what that symbol represents. And that was not Stalin who came in and ruined Lenin. That was all Lenin. And I've been living this for so long now that it's really, I guess that's why I was looking for The Odd Couple and Taxi. Those are probably about half of the total stories that I was able to pull, and like I said, the total finished pull came to 4,000 words out of 98,000 words for the total book. So it's that's a great idea, actually, Eric. That's actually a very good idea. Eric Blake mentioned maybe a title for the series would be Blood Red. That's really very, very good, honestly. That's really very, that may have solved a lot of my problems. So I just wouldn't give up. I wouldn't. I wouldn't give up. I knew there must have been somewhere first-hand account of this, but it's all buried. I swear to God, I've been looking for this, something like this, for 4 months, and I finished the episode too. And I was supposed to move on to the next one. I just was like, you haven't, you haven't made it clear what this really was. You haven't, going out and saying they murdered millions of people, tortured millions of people, doesn't mean anything. They murdered millions of children. No, that's terrible. Murdered children, you say, yeah, well, horrible. That's not enough. Um, it defies imagination. Andy Patcon says it keeps getting closer. I'm assuming we mean the Gorn here. When he's on my shoulder, then I'll be done with this thing. So I sent out an email to everybody who's on the email list, apologizing for having not done any shows for the last 3 nights. I hadn't edited them or posted them. I knew I had to. I kept pushing it off. And then at least last night, I thought I'd got to at least have something in the mailbox for Monday morning. And I just couldn't. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. It would have been another hour's worth of work to finish editing and posting these things, and I just couldn't do it. So I sent out an email today explaining why this had happened, and I've got a web post. I got a post up on BillWhittle.com explaining, what happened in the last 72 hours. Um, the, Lenin is starving his people, and he's selling grain internationally to make money to send to the Comintern to start communist revolutions around the world. And then the horrible, mean, vicious, heartless capitalists start sending free grain, which the American people pay for, to Lenin to feed the 10 million people who are starving. And some of it gets through, but some of the grain that's sent to save starving people, Lenin takes that grain, sells it on the international market, lets his people starve, takes the money he makes from selling the grain in order to start communist revolutions in places like the United States. That's who these people are. That's who they are. And I will be very happy to be finished with this. I will be very happy to not have to deal with this anymore, but I'll be very happy to get back to doing the content that I need to do for our members. I thought this thing was going to take me 2 months. It's taken me 6. And I'll be happy to get back to animation stuff and, colony stuff, all that stuff. But I've got about a week to finish 2 more scripts. One of them's about half done, so I can get that done, I think, in that time. Our friend Lisa, I can never get that right. Is it? Oh, yes, AOC. I'll just call him AOC. The Russians living today are descended from this, yet Putin is their president. The huge majority of Russian people are fine people, and I ought to know I'm married to a former Russian who's an American citizen now. And I know my stepdaughter, and I know my mother-in-law, and they're all fine people. But when you look at what's going on in Ukraine, this whole thing with the Red Terror, it's going on right now. And most of the people that were killed in the Red Terror, and most of the people that died in the big collectivization thing, most of the kulaks that all across southern Russia, but if you had to put them into labeled bins, the largest bin would be Ukrainians. 6 million Ukrainian peasants were killed in the Great Terror, because the Red Terror is nothing compared to the Great Terror. It's just a warm up. And so the Soviet Union falls in 1991, and we get Boris Yeltsin, and we think, okay, end of history. We don't have to worry about it. And then it just sneaks back. Talking to Natasha about this, I realized how Putin happened. Again, it's not so much our fault so much as we sure didn't help anything. But to give you an idea of what it looks like from the Russian perspective, you go from being a superpower to have your entire country collapse. Then you elect a guy named Boris Yeltsin, who spends most of his time completely drunk, is as corrupt as anybody else. And a couple years before Putin comes to power, there's like a G6 meeting or a G8 or a G12 or whatever the G is, right? You've got the president of the United States and the leader of France, Britain, all of the top industrial countries. And Yeltsin is at the conference, but he's not allowed in the room. He's asked to wait in the lobby. And when Russians hear that is humiliating, and rightfully so. So if you want to know how Putin managed to bring back the Soviet Union, then that's how he did it. No sound. I'm giving up. I'm done for the night. I'm not gonna. I've had two things fail, so I'm just done. I'm just gonna close it. Can anybody hear me? Okay. I'm done for the night. I'm just we lost the oh, it's back. Torture continues. I just told everybody in the comment section we're going to quit the show because the YouTube Twitch went out after 11 minutes, and now this is out again. How long is this? 43 minutes. It's not really long enough. Now some people are saying audio's out of sync, distorted. No, I'm done. It's just I don't know what to say. I just don't have the patience for this, and you can tell my voice is kind of shot too. So even though it's only 45 minutes, I think I'm going to just wrap it up. No, I'm going to stop. And everybody says just pause and resume. It's not on my end. It's yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm just going to wrap it up. Oh, and by the way, I had mentioned before that the Cold War series was going to open tomorrow, Tuesday. Right after I did the last show about that, I said, look, guys, is there anything I can help do with the promotion? And finally, they just decided to push it back. So the Cold War's been pushed back for 2, 3, 4 weeks, something like that, because the marketing's not in place, which is fine with me. So, so I am going to. I don't think I've ever done a show as less than an hour before, but it looks like this one's going to do it. My voice is going pretty fast. I'm going to get the right angles that I missed up now. I also have to. I didn't realize we did SoundCloud for the Stratosphere Lounge, so I've got a bunch of those to convert and get those things going up, and then I'll get caught up on that, and then I'll try and get these things done. Because I'm on the home stretch. It's just 8 episodes, and I've got 7 is about halfway done. So I think that'll probably do it. Anyway, sorry about that, but it's just when the YouTube stream went out, I was just like, okay, got it. So anyway, I didn't want to miss another one of these things. I've missed so many of them. So I'll get this thing posted, and I will hope to be finished by next Monday. But I will be finished by the Monday after that, that's for sure. And then we'll have some fun, and I'll get a chance to take some time off and, not off of this show, just not be doing this every night, and get away from these murdering bastards and all of it. I could take all of it, if it weren't for these kids waving this flag on college campuses, if it weren't for all of these people saying we should try communism. Most people don't know this stuff, and they're going to know it when time I'm done with it. All right. Anyway, thanks for everything. Sorry, I'm a little low on energy here. I've been, like I said, off my schedule, and this last 72 hours have been crazy. But actually, yeah, I'll see if I can post the. Hang on. I will post. Hang on. I've got the link. I'll put the link and to the Red Terror thing, so you can go discover for yourself what these guys are doing and what the modern left is trying to bring here to America. So that's something to think about. Okay, gang, thanks very much for being there. Thanks for your understanding, especially for the last couple of days. We're almost at the end of this thing. I know it's been a slog for all of you, and I'm just about done. Okay, so thanks for joining us, and we'll see you Thursday night for Stratosphere Lounge.